course, what is the basis of this unconstitutional behavior? Of course, you may have heard that the idea of profiling people by race or religion or the way they look or skin color, that sort of thing, is of course a great constitutional concern. The other concern, of course, is that the federal government has regulated immigration and the federal law is supreme. It is the Constitution that says that federal law is the supreme law of the land. However, it is very common to have legislation on both the state and federal level. Over here in the courts all the time there's possession of marijuana cases, even though marijuana is illegal under federal law too. You can have gun violations. The federal government regulates guns, but the state law does too. And so it is not unusual to have state law on the same topic as a federal law. What happens is the state law can't overturn the federal law. But for example, you can have a $5.35 per hour minimum wage nationally, and New York City can have a $7 one. You can always have something stricter, you just can't repeal the federal law by the state legislation. So it happens all the time. But what Congress is saying is that that they have occupied, or what the Justice Department is arguing, is that Congress has occupied the field, which means that they have so comprehensively regulated that any regulation by the states would disrupt this finely tuned machine that is working so well on the federal level. But the Second American Revolution can't be stopped. On June 2nd, 2011, the Alabama legislature enacted HB 56. The Alabama Governor Robert Bentley signed HB 56 into law on June 9th of this year, 2011. Most of the provisions were scheduled by law to go into effect on September 1, 2011, which someone I was talking about is pretty fast. That was maybe not a good idea. I think that normally when they pass a new law, they put it out so far that people have time to adapt. But it's very quick. The Justice Department filed a lawsuit challenging the law as unconstitutional, as for the same reasons we said. But what shocked everybody is that the federal judge at the trial level upheld the law, or almost all of it. It then went to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and what really shocked people is that the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals on October 14, 2011 allowed most of the law to go into effect. So right now, even though Arizona passed the controversial law and other states have followed, the most strict anti-immigration law in the country that is actually in effect is in Alabama. Almost everything that they passed there, including some of the things that were blocked in the Arizona law that is trying to take up the Supreme Court now, was allowed to go into effect. Some of the things were not. Now, I don't know if someone has my time here, but I'm going to switch from going, I had prepared, and I think I will in a little bit, just so you know what's in effect and what's interesting, is go through what was allowed to go into effect. But I'm going to switch a little bit and talk, I think, more about the issues and the considerations about that and the importance of this entire process. I was talking to, I don't know if anyone can help me with time, if someone can...
7:05.
Okay, if someone can, I was talking to someone who I can't get into too much about who it is an expert in customs and border control and law enforcement, talking about how much of a danger we have, for example, from Canada. Canada had a very open process, and they say that almost every terrorist group known had some cell or presence in Canada. That the border, I grew up in Florida where we have the Bahamas, and they had an extensive cooperation during the Reagan administration with balloon-based radar and airplanes and all things like that. He said up between Seattle and Canada, wide open islands, just hardly policed at all, according to this person. And I think that the impact on our safety is very serious in terms of not just somebody taking jobs, although I think that I just don't accept that it doesn't impact our economy. I think it does. Our economy is complex, and that's why, as we were talking earlier today, I think having a law like that go into effect in from June to September is too fast for an economy to adapt. But I do think it has a negative impact. But what struck me here, is that about this Alabama law, you have a lot of church leaders, including, if you know, Regent University, founded by Pat Robertson, was denouncing this law. That a bunch of bishops and evangelical church leaders and the head of Regent University denouncing the Alabama law on religious grounds. Now, one of the provisions of the law does make it illegal to transport or harbor or conceal an illegal immigration or assist them or encourage them. And that maybe they feel strikes close to home for them. But it's interesting, I think, how controversial some of these things are. And maybe we'll get into some discussion, but I thought I would just touch very briefly on some of the considerations about that, because it seems to me that so much of this discussion, it strikes me as from people who've never been outside the country. As if you go to the borders of the United States and you go outside the borders, you'll fall off the edge of the earth and be eaten by dragons. You know, because like the old flat earth theory, that there is nothing outside our borders. You know, there are, what are we, 5%, 3% of the world's population? The rest of the world's population gets up, goes to work, most of them, hopefully, they eat, they do all the things we do, maybe not with much prosperity as we have, and they're doing it all the time. You know, this is not the only place in the world you can get a job or live or eat or have children and things like that. And yet the discussion is as if someone doesn't come here, you know, they're going to die. They're going to be eaten, fall off the edge of the flat earth. And I think that we have to consider things. To my mind, the countries that dump their people on our doorstep have a responsibility to build their own economy. They need to reform. They need to fix what's wrong with their country. They need to build a system of, well, for us to talk about a country, a government with integrity, you know, we may choke a little bit, but relatively speaking, we have a government and a system with some level of integrity, the rule of law, and a system that works, and we've worked very hard to get here. It didn't just happen. But the idea is that if we just save a few from another country, just a handful, the rest of them back home, they can go to hell. You know, the people who come here, they should, in my opinion, need to do what we did, which is to reform their own country. But instead the attitude is, if a few people sneak across here and steal our jobs, that the people left behind, well, who cares about them? Well, if you're going to really say you're an evangelical leader and you're going to care about people, what you should care about is that the entire country gets reformed through the gospel and through capitalism and through government, you know, getting rid of government corruption and everything like that. You can't really say that I care about the people who sneak across the border and break our laws, which is not very biblical, and you don't care about the entire nations left behind who are wallowing in corruption and a bad system. So I'm just amazed at how much of this is not, is very confused and gets a lot of people all riled up in different attitudes as far as that goes.